to understand that there are six outer layers within the Pardaki, and the Pardaki actually extends this far. So you have 6 outer layers, and then the 9 inner layers. And the 9th layer, if you count them moving out from the middle, is called the Ka. Now the Ka layer, we have the Ka, the Ma, and the Ta, and they progressively run back in here. We have the charts with all their little names and what state of ether vapor they actually are. Because what we're dealing with is something called the Etha, or the Etta is what it started as way back in the first Pardaki was conceptualized before it was born, when it was first a thought. All right, so it has to do with this Etta substance that goes through this process in the birthing of the Pardaki process, where it becomes eventually the ethers, and it is the core of all manifest transaction or a manifestation of any kind, where consciousness turns into ethers, and then the ethers become different things. So all of that information of how those ethers get there, that's in that first stage of the journey before the birth of the first Pardaki. So eventually that will be there if you ever want to look up the detail, but won't be this week. All right. So anyway, we have 9 inner Jaleesic states and 6 outer Jaleesic states just within the Pardaki of the Taran unit. These become important, and also, if you'll notice, you remember the Kathara grid shape, right? Well, it looks like there's lots of Kathara grids here. And what you'll see, actually, is there are different axes where each of the Jaleesic states has its top at a different axis, because it spins 45 degrees after that one was created. Now that has to do where these Jaleesic states were created within the Pardaki has to do with the birth of the Pardaki. I hate to see how many pages those diagrams would cover. That was happening while the 2 Allahs collided with each other. There was that whole thing that was happening up here with the 2 up-phasing pieces of Pardaki 2 that came back down to the center to form that. And a whole bunch of stuff occurred in the center to form these Jaleesic states. Hopefully we never even have to really know what that is, because there's a million other things that I could spend 100 pictures on and 100 years drawing. But we have these states in here, and these are important because this is where you start to understand how, first of all, what in the world is a key? We have keys of Enoch out there. We have, these keys, harmonic keys. We have people talking about blood crystals and crystal keys and all these kind of things. It all starts here, and keys are not yet. What we have so far are Jaleesic states that are held in the form of Urs and Rus and combinations thereof within the Pardaki, which is the first living light unit that has 3 Pardaki and 1 Pardaki in the center, and this field around it. The field is called the Ishana. Okay, this is called karyatric matter, where you had atomic, etheric, catharic, and now we have karyatric matter. So these are the core, I call them matter because they become matter types, all right? But these are before you even get to matter types. These are base states, base Jaleesic states. All right, next one, please. Am I ever going to get down to chakra 1? All right, this is showing a little more clearly the 9 inner layers, right? Now, where we had before the 3 outer Ina, the 3 Ina on the outside, and then the 4th Ina Ka on the inside, this is just the 4th one, okay? It's enlarged so you can see more clearly the 9 inner Jaleesic states, because it's in this area of the Pardaki of the Taran light seed that Kelana sparks are generated, and Kelana sparks then form Kelans, and Kelans then form harmonic keys, and harmonic keys form Kasha keys and crystal keys, and crystal keys carry joules, which is the quantum differential, but I won't get into that yet, and they eventually, crystal keys and Kasha keys, come together to activate their harmonics, and when they do, they form tachyons, and tachyons are superluminal units, are the carriers of consciousness. Now, tachyons are what allow for whatever got to that stage of expansion. It allows for quantum replication, where it can go into source through the creation point. At first, it's doubled, it's times 2. But later, that timesing builds, where it goes times 2, times 2, times 2, then times 3, then times 12, then times 12, where you start getting a quantum expansion taking place, where more and more energy, because more and more energy keeps being given back to Source through the sparking, Source gives more and more energy back out. And it progressively builds this structure, this expansion, where the Taran, it starts with the Taran, and at a certain point, the Taran finishes its tachyon cycle, then it disappears temporarily. So before we get to that, which will be in a little bit, we're going to start to see me go, what was that again? Because we're going to be losing words soon, where we just got into the diagrams that we only had time to do, I think about 5 of them, where they actually have some words on them. I just wanted you to see that they will have the detail. They're not all scribbly ones, and they're not really vague. There's detail on every one of these. Here you got layer 1 at the creation point, the nada or carbogel. This is a type of gelesic, all right, state. It's a type of gelesic radiation. These are base radiation states, all right, and eventually that base radiation becomes states of matter or pre-matter, and then eventually states of matter. So at carbogelesic on layer 1. Layer 1 is that little tiny point in the center. It would be at just literally in the center point, all right, inside of what's called the flame. The flame, I believe, has a quantum of, I think it's 1/3, and you get 3 1/3 as divine constant, because you combine the 3 ina of the Taran that always come back with the 1/3 and you get the 3 1/3, and it's considered the divine constant in terms of the math of all of this. But we don't need to get into the math right now. At least I can't. I'm so tired at this point. I wouldn't do it justice. But at the center point, the little tiny one, the first layer, and see, when I first introduced these, I had them numbered the other way, where I started with the ka as number 1 and worked inward. And it works better since we're coming outward and there's 6 more that have to come out on the outside to put them this way. And they said it didn't matter. It would just to know that there are, 9 and then 6 on the outside. So we now have them numbered from the smallest one being number 1 in the center coming outward. All right, we have the carbogel creation point, the nada ore. That's on axis. That's just sitting in the creation point. Then at what's called axis 0, which is at this axis over here. Okay, you have what are called they call it a 6-axis, but it's really 8 points of rotation, 8 angles where the top could be. All right, and this gets into time cycles and things later, but it's even taking place within the relationship of the units of radiation that form the encryption structure of the partikey within the first Taran unit. All right, so we have layer 2 is the Adama. This is where we get, it's called the flame of Adama. This is where we get the Adamic races. This is where we get the story of Adam and Eve and all that stuff. It was all taken and paraphrased from these books that taught this stuff. So we have layer 2 at axis 0, the Adama state, radiation state. That is what is called protogel. And yes, eventually it does have something to do with protons and the formation of protons, which are groups of 6 quarks, I believe. Right. Now, in scientific terms down here. Now, layer 3, axis number 1, which is here. So it started at axis 0, then it moved to axis 1. Layer 3, axis 1 is the Jaffa. It's called neurogel. All right. I wonder if that has something to do with neutrons. Eventually, when it gets, once the step out occurs, once it goes from gelesic radiation states into what are called photogels, it goes into what are called plasma gels, and then into pre-matter states. And from there, you get the things that become the subatomic units like quarks and things that form the matter base here. All right, on level 4, layer 4 is axis 2, which is another 45-degree shift. That's called the tau cryogel. All right. Each one of these are explained. I'm not going to go through every one of them again, but there are the lists, and on these charts you will see little lists that show what is cryogel exactly. They all have to do with different states of ether vapor. All right? Some are cold, some are hot, some are flaming, some are crystallized. And they all have to do with different states of the ether vapor, which is a pre-substance substance that formed the first imprint for the first particle before the first particle was born, way back in that first pre-creation stage. Layer 5, on axis 3, is the Ida. It's Christogel. All right. Layer 6, axis 4, is the Jada, ectogel. Here we're getting the beginnings of the Jada Avida. All right, the Jada Avida, the Garden of Eden stuff. All right. Layer 7, we have on axis 5, it's the Ta. It's called hydrogel. Layer 8, axis 6 is the Ma. It's magnogel. And then layer 9, axis 7, is the Inaka, or the Ka, thermogel. And they wanted us to understand these layers so we'd understand what keys are, what Kelana sparks are, what keys are, and where these things form. So you realize they're very real things, and they have to do with literally the atomic structure. And wherever you see, they told me this, and I don't understand how they cluster yet, but where you see an atom, where you see a proton, as actually they said, where you see a proton, it implies a particle, which means a particle is a cluster. Right? A particle is the center unit of a cluster with 3 around it that is a part of a Taran living light seed, which means every proton has these structures that it's formed of, which means when we look at an atomic body, a body made of atoms and molecules, we are seeing one level of it, where for every one atom we're seeing, there are actually a cluster of 3 behind that. And certain ones, like the atomic number happens to be the proton number down here, right? Where if you have atomic number 1 means you've got 1 proton in there, okay, in that atom, and that creates the element hydrogen. You know, if you have 8 protons, I believe, it creates oxygen, right? Well, if you had 8 protons, and every proton meant there was a particle, how many particle are there? You see, there's this structure behind every atom. And it's this structure that if the light body is working properly, it will phase and spark and flow, and it will recharge the atoms. Bodies that have this working don't die. They grow to a certain state. They hit their height of expansion, which will be determined by whatever encryption they carried as their full encryption. And then they will just be able to sustain that state eternally for as long as they want to, unless they decide to change that state and demanifest it and become something else. All right, we die here, we get sick here, because this process is turned off in our atoms. And what we're beginning to do now, and that's why they're trying to help us understand what keys are and all these things, is to understand when we talk about these things that seem way up there, and there are huge ones. There are ones that are massive in size, right, where universes look like one atom. And imagine the size of the light balls behind, if you had one universe, and that was like one little atom, imagine the size of the light balls and the Tarans behind that. So there's really large structures, but even small structures and atoms and things like down here all have this structure behind them. And it's if these structures are functioning, if the particle unit of the Taran is still capable of doing its life generation by doing the cycling of the keys of the sparks and the keys through the gelesic layers, it will create the currents that flow out and into the atoms and then back from the atoms again that create the perpetual regeneration of atoms. It's not just regeneration of them. There's a certain point in time when atoms would do the same thing. They would actually follow their Taran and the other things that are created from this back into source. We're just like the Taran that you'll see at the end of this cycle will actually go and pop back right in through the central creation point, which was the first point of creation of the first particle, right? That one central creation point. It'll pop back through there, and it'll come out, and it'll be times 2. And it will have replicated. And it will also give off a current of frequency that become what are called the winds. And they're the spark pulse currents that come out and circulate through the structures of light ball or light cell formation that happens as the replication occurs. We all have this inherent, all our atoms have this inherent structure, and our entire composite self as an atomic structure has a large light body itself. When we work with chakras, we are dealing with things that are taking energy that is being generated through interactions that take place with these light body cells and bringing it through a very intricate network of circulation through chakras and all the things that are in the Cathara 2-3 manual, all the light body pieces and crystal body pieces, where the chakras circulate the energy naturally through. Right now we have mutated chakras because we have mutated light bodies, because we're living on a mutated planet whose electromagnetic fields and Merkaba fields and light body is out of whack because of things that were done here with black hole technologies progressively before Atlantis and after. So we are still back here at this stage. We're looking at the Jaleesic states inside of a particle of one single, the original, the first, Taran living light seed, which is also called the Akasha God seed. All right, next one, please. I'm going to have to go faster, or we're going to be here for 900 years. So if I start talking really fast, that's why. Now, if you just take away that grid that showed the expansion ratios, and on that grid, by the way, that showed the expansion ratios, there is a very specific ratio. Remember how I said when we first saw the first encryption or the first Cathara grid that the ratios of those shapes, how it was a square in the middle and then half a square distance on each end, very specific ratios of math to the placement of those dots of radiation of the Cathara grid. Well, there is a particular expansion formula, mathematical formula of how those little 12-point sets or Cathara grids expand outward and get bigger. We'll see that a little bit more clearly a little later when we get into the spiral diagrams that show it more clearly. But when you take the natural expansion ratios that are inherent to the Cathara grid structure and you build your layers, where you're trying to do a diagram of the inside of a particle, you need to show that each of those layers, you can't just put them randomly because they are very specific relationships of how big one is compared to how big another is. And those relationships of how deep those fields are, how much of this is Ka, how much of this is Tha, or Ta, how much of this is whatever the state is, right? Going all the way down to 1, has to do with, from the first little axis, the first little tiny Cathara grid encryption that was on, say, 0 axis, or actually before that you have creation point 1. That was kind of like on no axis, because I believe its axis is pointed in to source, all right? And it just flips in and out, where these are actually rotating around, the one that are flipping in and out. So you have 0-point axis that would be here, then you have 1, then you have 2, then you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then you're back to 0, 8. Again, okay? So this is actually the cycle of the octaves taking place right within a particle. But these are specifically spaced by the expansion ratios inherent to the Cathara grids, where there's a particular rotation. If you rotate them 45 degrees and then use, the easy way they told me was to use what was the 9 Cathara center on the 1 and draw it across and then draw an arc up from that, and then you'll find the 12. No, the 12 becomes the 9 on the other one? Yeah, I think so. I'll show you when I get to that anyway. But anyway, these are what my point is. The proportions are important, and they're showing you the amount of field space within the particle. How much is what type of Jaleesic state? All right. Now, we're still just, this whole circle is still just the particle. It isn't, we're not seeing the Tarn. Remember, it's inside of the Tarn living light unit. So you have the 3 particae around that, but they're, big. Here are the Jaleesic states and what they are. I'm not going to read all these now because we'll be here forever, but this is information that we are trying to compile in a way so one of these workshops, hopefully we will have the product available that has all these diagrams, because we've been getting these since Tenerife and just getting hit with them where we don't even have time to catch up with what they look like. We can't hand them out to you that way because we won't hand them out if, what if it said I put the wrong word there? I have to go back through these with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that I translated it right before I release them publicly in written form. Because when I speak them, I'll say, well, I think it's this, and if I'm not sure about that, well, I'll let you know. But anyway, so these are coming, but you have the 9 inner Jaleesic states, and you have the Nada, the Adama, the Jaffa, the first 3. You have the Tao, T-A-O, the Ida, the Jada, the second 3, the Ta, the Ma, and the Ka, the last 3. And the first 3 form the field that is called the Atma. The second 3 form what is called the Etha. And the third 3, 7 through 9, form what is called the Ketha aspects of the inside of the particle. And they are, again, the Jaleesic radiation states within the center of a particle. Light generator, photo generator, they call them. Okay? Now, read all the stuff for now. Create a fine particle. Again, it's just showing you the same thing. If we could look up here, please. All right, remember, all this is taking place. This is like, you're seeing, this is just this. All right? Now, this whole thing together is called the ovum, the egg of living light. All right? It's a 6 outer particle with with its Iyuka 9 inner layers. So the 9 inner layers are called the Iyuka altogether, or the yolk. That's what Iyuka means in the encryption languages. So you have the egg of life. The egg is the ova which refers to the flame at the center of the partiki. So you put ova together, you get the ovum. That's where there's a lot of our words in English that are very, very similar to the original encryptions. And I think I don't know why exactly, but there's something special about English that there's a reason why, and that's why they translated it into this particular language instead of, like, say, Hebrew or Sanskrit or something this time. But I don't know what that is for sure this time. Anyway, just want you to see. This is referred to as the ovum, egg of living light, with the 6 outer partiki layers and the 9 inner yolk layers of Gelesic radiation states. Okay, now, that, again, is just the partiki. Just this one is this, enlarged. That shows you 9 states going out, which means this would be the 9th one out, which would be the ka level, right? You have the ka and the ma and the ta, and then you work your way down wherever that list is. I don't know if I'm memorized yet. When you get out here, you have level 10, level 11, level 12 within the partiki, and then there's 3 other layers outside of the partiki that actually surround the partiki within the tarn. So there would be, if you have 10, 11, and 12 would be right there. That's the 12th one, right? Then outside, when you're past the barrier of the partiki, there's this thin layer. It would be 13, then 14, and then 15. Yep, I have to get over there to see. Those, the outer layers are these. The 6 outer radiation layers within and around the partiki. Within it, you have 10, the Ra, R-H-A, the Sha at 11, and the La, S-H-A-N-L-H-A. Surrounding the partiki, the 3 outermost, are the Ka, K-H-A, the Tha, T-H-A, and the Ra, R-A. This is where we end up getting the flame of Ra that we work with in the Kathara 2-3 manual. This is where we get the Kathara, the Kathara grid, the light, sound, one. All right? So this is, it all fits together. It all starts with the very first phasing of the first partiki that builds the first Taran living light unit. And that gives you the Gelesic states when you take them off their spiraling expansion rate, which each one of these is a little Kathara grid turned at the next angle, embedded within each other. And it gives you the progression, the mathematical size progression and the quantum progression of the sizes of those spheres of energy that are created, or those areas of energy that are the Gelesic states. You will find this pattern progressively as these things create more things. You'll find something called the star-burn cycle that expands in the same way, except you have tarns creating other things outside of them. But before a tarn can do anything like replicate itself and become the next stage, it has to go through what's called a tachyon cycle first. Next one, please. All right. Here we go. Okay. I think I'll start at the bottom, please. See that interesting bubble of balls? Well, when the tarn is relaxed and it's not having interactions within its core, which once it starts, it tends to keep doing. The first thing it will start to do is contract. The process of these 3 things being in here and rubbing against each other actually starts to generate sparks, and it causes the 3 units to contract. Where right now, when the tarn first comes, when the tarn is its natural relaxed expansion state, these bottom balls, the 2 atomic sparks, are at 45 degrees to the 0 center line. Okay? When the tarn begins to what's called phasing of the tarn, these 2 actually start to pull toward each other, right, through the electromagnetic attraction. Remember, one is a negative electrical charge, one's positive electrical charge, both atomic. So they start to pull toward each other. Yet it's really crowded in there, so as they pull toward each other, they start to also push up. And as they're pulling toward each other, and they get to like 30 degrees from 0 point each side, they also are pushing up as they go. And as that's pushing up, it also causes this one, the etheric one, to squeeze downward. And it actually contracts the Taran in, where if this well, I'll show you in a second. Can I see the top one a minute, please? Thank you. Where if you took the big Cathara grid, right, that runs through the whole size of the sphere of the entire Taran unit, not just the smaller Cathara grids inside the party key. And if that was point 12 up there, right, you have 12, 11, the center line coming down. This would be the big outer Cathara grid. And that's the size of the Taran when it's expanded and when its balls are in this position, right, when it's Ale and Abade are in these positions. When it contracts, can we go up now, please? It contracts into this configuration where the two atmic ones slide toward each other and pull up toward the center, toward the inflame, and where is it? This one. The ina, which is the second spark, the etheric, pulls down, and that process of the two atmic pulling up and the etheric pulling down, it's going to create interactions here, but it also causes the whole sphere to pull in, because part of it's pulling in toward creation point. Now, we have all these Jaleesic layers taking place inside of this one here, right? Color would help. This here is the party key. So this is the photogenerator unit, and that's the center of it. Now, as this contraction occurs, here down at the center point, you have what is remember level 1, which was the nada ore, right, the diamond ore? Well, it's a carbojaleesic, a crystallized, frozen ether unit, or etha unit. And when this contraction occurs of the Taran, there is what is called a piezoelectric response that begins to happen between the Jaleesic states as the compression from the other Jaleesic states being pushed in, with all of this being pushed in toward onto the center point. It creates a piezoelectric state, which I'm not going to get into right now, but it's a particular type of interaction that has to do with electrical energy released and exchanged because of compression. And it occurs at the core. And this starts in motion, a process of sparking. Now, there are piezoelectric responses that take place between the ers and rus that are holding the encryption within the party key. And each of the Jaleesic states, there begins to be a process of creation of what are called kilana. Now, kilana are sparks. There are specific kinds of kilana. I believe there are urta kilana and ruta kilana. And urta ones would have a positive charge, and ruta ones would have the negative charge, etc. So there's a lot of detail, and each would have a specific quantum, which somewhere I have the scribbled notes on what they are. But right now we don't need to know that, because I would never have got down here at all tonight. And we're all going to be asleep. I'm going to be asleep on my feet, and you're going to be asleep in your chairs if I try to go there. But if we could understand that by the contraction of the Taran, it creates, these units push on each other and rub together, and it creates sparks. And there's a specific area inside of those Jaleesic layers that, because of the piezoelectric reaction that's beginning in the nada ore crystal, and because of the sparks that are happening between the squeezing crystals, there is one area, it's called the Jaffa layer, where kilana sparks start. Next one, please. What? I'm getting tired. I hope I don't start tripping. Here we go. Yes, here we go. And see how much I can remember without any words. I think it's the same one. Yeah. Is it the same one? Did I leave two of them in there? This was the one without the words? Yeah. So that was what we were seeing. We're seeing the Taran, right, in its expansion form and its contraction form. Remembering that inside the party key, there are the 9 inner and 6 outer Jaleesic layers, remembering that the party key is in the center of the Taran, right? So this is at its expansion state, when it's relaxed and it's not sparking, but when it goes in to generate sparks is when it squeezes in together, and these all push on each other and push on the center crystal, and they begin to make sparks. Next one, please. Here is where it goes crazy, where this stuff is so complex. It's beautiful. I mean, this creation story is awesome, and that's what keeps me motivated when I feel like I just want to go to sleep and never do another diagram again. You know? What this is showing you is, again, we're back here. This is the Taran, right? This is the party key of the Taran. We are looking just at the party key of the Taran and the 9 inner Jaleesic states, and I don't even have marked on this one yet, the 10, 11, and 12. And then the ones that go out from there, that are the 3 outer ones around the party key itself. Because the interactions that are first going to take place, and if I can get through this one without tripping over myself, I'll be amazed, because it's complex. But here's the key to finding out what keys are. All right. each one of these things, by the way, is a spark, okay? Now, it starts with, I'm not going to read all of this stuff. It's very hard for me to read small print without my glasses on, and I trip over myself with my glasses on because it kills my depth perception. So I'm going to just try to wing it and explain as best as possible. This stuff has been read already in public as one long dissertation on Kilans and things like that. But what I've done is broke it down into stages to at least be able to illustrate some of them. What it is showing you here, this is the part, these don't have, they're not done yet, are they? What is that one? Does that have a title on it up there? Oh. Okay, yeah, these are the ones that we're in process right now. Okay, yeah, they're just in process because it has some words on it. Because these were the parts I was able to take off the type that was already, typeset from one of the other workshops in a long form. I cut it up into little blocks and reduced it down in the photocopier so I could start the stages. What I'll try to explain here is, and these, you know what I'll do? I'll do this way because it will be better. We can get these done by morning. There's 4 or 5 in this sequence. And they're a key sequence in understanding Kilans and tachyons and all of that kind of stuff. So instead of trying to flub my way through them, what I will do is show you that they exist. I will show you, I can tell you briefly, because I'm just learning this stuff too, what this has to do, this particular diagram, is something that's taking place with the first contraction of the taran when it makes one set of 12 Kilana sparks. So the taran contracts, and the little balls rub against each other, the ala, the ale, and the apode rub against each other and through the gelesic states, and they create sets of gelesic sparks. The inner 9 layers are considered proto-gelesic. So they will create proto-gelesic sparks, and then the outer eventually will create what are called photo-gelesic sparks. And eventually, we don't even have the series down yet, but after a certain point, not even here, after certain other things take place, then there will be some kind of plasmaic, I believe they called it, plasmaic sparks that come from when certain structures of the starborn cycle phase and create more sparks on the outer levels of bigger light body constructs. But it all starts here with these phasings. So what we have here is the formation of first Kilana sparks. One pulse of the taran creates a set of 12 Kilana sparks. It creates 12 positive charge and 12 negative charge Kilana sparks. The positive ones are the carriers of the Manet, what's considered the Manet force, and the negative ones are the carriers of the Ire force. And those sparks are created in level 3. So when the taran contracts in level 3, which is called the Jaffa, I have this enlarged here because you can't even see it on this enlargement, right? So you have level 4 here, level 3 here, right? This is where they form, right? So one pulse of the taran creates a set of 12 of the sparks. And then it, I believe, what happens is they create in the Jaffa when it's in contraction, and then level 3 Jaffa. And then the taran expands because certain things that those sparks cause to interact with the inner core. It causes this to release, the particae, the particae ina, 3 ina, to expand back out and release the contraction. And when they expand back out, these sparks squeeze back in and collect into the center. And then it causes another pulse. So there is literally, every time there's a pulse of the taran, it creates a set of 12 sparks. Now, these 12 Kilana sparks form what are called Kilans. When they pull in, when a set of 12 sparks pulls in to the center, it pulls into level 2, I believe, into level 2, which is the Adama, around the level 1, which is the Nada, right? It forms a specific organization, and this stuff explains in detail why, and I won't even try to read it because I'm tired enough where I'll trip over my tongue and probably put you all to sleep. But what is happening here is the sparks were made in level 3, the Jaffa, while the taran was in contraction. And then because of those sparks interacting with the center, with the core, it caused another reaction that had the taran release its contraction. And in that release of contraction, as the taran units, the particae units of the taran went back out, the sparks that were made in the Jaffa level 3 pulled in to the center, and they organize upon the Chris code, and they organize into sets of you end up with 12 sparks that organize into 4 sets of 3. 3 sparks, Partakai sparks, are 3 of these Kilana sparks, which are sparks from Partakai, form 1 Kilan. Now, for ages, we've talked about chelantic science. And a Kilan is formed with what we called in the early days, we said just 3 Partakai. Because when you get it bigger and you're dealing with Partakai-sized sparks, we're dealing with little tiny ones right now, it's the same principle, though. We have 3, you call these Partakites, I believe, these little Kilana sparks that are generated by the Partakai that are, because these are Partakai, remember the 3 Ina are Partakai, and this one in the center is a Partaki. Right, which means it's a photogenerator. Right, so these can spark and this generates. And now we're back here. We have the 12 sparks that were created by one pulse of the Tarn. Those 12 sparks form 4 sets of 3 sparks. Each of those 3 sparks form a Kilan, or a crystallization in toward the core. The crystallization is a Kilan. You have 4 Kilans. They're the first 4 Kilans that form. Now, when they form, another contraction occurs, which means another set of 12 Kilana sparks are made in the Jaffa. And when they're made in the Jaffa, they interact with the ones that are already pulled into the core, and they cause the Taran to release its contraction, and it sends more of them into the core. So now you have 2 sets of 12 sparks. The Taran goes through a set of 12 pulses. And that set of 12 pulses, I believe, is called a Kilan cycle. It's a quantum generating cycle, a spark generation cycle. That cycle is a part of something else. Now, every time it is happening, remember, each one of these sparks has a specific quantum of a Ru count and an count, a specific quantum of stored electrical potential. And that stored electrical potential is what becomes the joules that are actually the things that if you burn a substance here and measure it, how they measure calories and stuff in water, they measure the joule count. It's used for counting units of heat or units of, let's say they use it in heat and something else. There's 2 different numbers they use for like how many calories per joule. Yeah, for generally units of energy, units of heat, but also units. Yeah, so it's like how many joules do you get in the calories that you eat in a day to keep your body from functioning? And if you don't eat at all, eventually you die because your body doesn't get any more joules because it can't generate its own naturally. That's why we have to eat down here, because we have to get our joules from someplace, because the body runs on joules. And the body's supposed to be able to be its own little joule manufacturer. And we're beginning to turn that process back on. And I think part of the heat flashes we get sometimes have to do with that. Oh, yeah, made some joules that time. Ouch, felt that. Right? It all starts here, where we had from the first thought down to the triad, down to the Taran. Okay? Now we have the first sets of sparks. One set of 12 sparks would be from one pulse of the Tarn. 12 sets of 12 sparks are one, I believe they call it, it's a Kilana cycle. I see the names of these. I'm not going to try to guess at them because I have them written down someplace. But it's all new stuff, so it's hard to remember. But anyway, this diagram here shows you 12 pulses of the Tarn, through which 144, or 12 times 12, Kilana sparks have been manufactured. So there's quantum manufacturing building going on here. Next one, please. I just want to show you how at least these connect, and we'll get more coherent on this tomorrow and plug it more into the elementals as well. This would be the second phase. Now, here we go. There's a certain set of things that occur that will be listed here sometime tomorrow, I hope, that this is really, really complicated stuff as far as what is taking place, but at least we do know, at least you do know, it is in writing someplace, and we're getting it fine-tuned, so eventually you will be able to look this up. We do know what we're talking about. It's just that this is new to me too, and it's not easy to translate. But the next stage, after you have a set of 12 pulses of the Tarn and a generation of 144 sparks, there's something that occurs in the core, and I'm not going to try to read it, but I'll get into that tomorrow. But it causes the Kilan bonds. Now remember, every time a set of 12 sparks were generated, they pulled into the core and into groups of 3 that formed Kilans, right? So progressively, with each of the 12 spark cycles that happened on the other page, it was progressively building Kilans outward through the parta key, and that's called the chelantic crystal lattice. So by the time that there were 12 pulses of the tarn, you had 12 sets of 12 sparks that formed, I forget how many. I have the breakdown on how many chelons it formed and all of that to go with it. So we at that point, we have a parta, at that point, before we get to here, when you saw the other diagram, we had the whole parta key was actually filled with spark points that were in clusters of 3 that were in groups of 4. All right, so you had all of those. Now, after that final phase of the final 12th cycle, the 12th pulse of the tarn, what you end up with are, you hit a critical mass of quantum generation. And at that point, there are certain interactions that take place within, I believe, which layer is it that heats up? I think it's the Jaffa layer heats up, and that was neurogel, right? The Jaffa layer is the neurogelic state. It heats up, and what did it do first? It causes the chelon bonds that are holding all of those little chelons together, right, that are holding the sparks together to form chelons. There are certain things that in the small print you find of how those sparks organize themselves into those clusters of 3 and 4. Well, those bonds finally release once 144 of those sparks are generated. When they release, those sparks are freed again to go do something else. When they were combined as chelons, a chelon has 3 sparks of the same polarity. So 3 negatives or 3 positives that are linked through a common opposite pole unit that's in whatever, I think it's in the Jaffa field when they first start, when they're first manufactured. So those bonds release, and the chelonas are set free again from the chelons, and this allows them to be pulled to the outside where they form what are called harmonic key sets. Now, one harmonic key, right, which is that double unit, is a set of 6 electrical chelona sparks, which would be the Erta sparks, and 6 of the magnetic ones, or the negative charged ones, which would be the Ruta sparks. The Erta ones have more quantum than the Ruta ones do. So what you have is 2 different quantum sparks, but they're linking together by opposite polarity this time. All right, a harmonic key is 6 of the ones that are linked with one polarity and 6 with the other polarity. Now they do something interesting that I can see if I can do the next diagram without going insane. But where these link, they come from where they were formed throughout the chelantic lattice. They lose their chelon bonds, and then they pull out to here into this layer, which is the Ka layer, out into 9, right? So they've pulled out from here and into layer 9, and any of them, I think there might have been some out there to pull in. So they meet in layer 9 in the Ka. And this is where we start to get into like the keys of Enoch Ka, right? And the keys of Enoch, that kind of thing. First it starts with harmonic keys, which are a set of bass tone negative and overtone electrical positive charge. They're both electrical. One is negative charge, one's positive charge. And they are spark clusters, 6 sparks each. Next one, please. And there was a set of 12 of them there. All right. So if you had 12 of those harmonic key units, each of them with 12 sparks, 6 positive, 6 negative, it's 12 times 12. There are your 144 chelona sparks, right, that were manufactured right before. It gets interesting after that. Yeah, well, there's something, and I believe this is the one. I wanted to get to this just enough so you could understand something about jewels when we talk about the jewels in the heart of the lotus and stuff. What we had on the other page were these, right? They were harmonic key sets before they're activated and before they go through something called, what is it called? Resolution. There's something called key resolution that is resolving the quantum difference between the 2 sets of the 2 parts of what is a harmonic key. Because one harmonic key is the 6 bass tone and the 6 overtone sparks, the positive and negative ones. Where you get the 12 sparks, that makes one harmonic key. However, they have a quantum differential issue happening where this one has more quantum for its spark units than this one does. And in order for them to store and to build up, where you can go through cycles of them and build more quantum, there's something called quantum resolution that has to take place. Quantum resolution is kind of interesting. If I can just explain this one without looking at words, I remembered more than I thought. Now, we were in the Ka layer, right? That's where these guys were on the last diagram that you saw, right? Well, you get 12 of those, and what they begin to do, and this just like it, I don't know if there's anything exactly that it is, and it's just when they form, they first do this, and then they go right into this. It's not that something else makes them do that, but they first form like this, and then just interacting with each other this way causes this to happen. Now, if you took the quantum of here, and let's say each one of those sparks had 33 1/3 stored electrical potential positive, and let's say each one of these had 11 2/3 negative electrical potential. If you subtracted the total quantum of this overtone key, of this bass tone key from the overtone key, it would give you the difference between the two, right, as far as quantum. And that difference would be called the quantum differential. In order for these keys to bind properly and to begin to build what can become tachyons, they have to reach the quantum differential point, which means the larger overtone key will give to the bass tone key an equal quantum. So it takes away from itself, right, the same quantum that is held within here. And I believe this comes out to be, when you take the 6 sparks times 11 2/3, it comes out to be like 70.002 stored electrical potential negative. So you get that same amount taken from here. And I forget what this one is. It's, I think, about 200 stored electrical potential when you take the 6 ers, and each one at 33 1/3. So this one now loses a 70 quantum, right? And it gets left with, forget what exactly it gets left with. I think it's like 129.998, something like that. Whatever. The numbers aren't what's most important. What's most important is understanding the process. What was this becomes this, okay? It loses an equal quantum to this, so it can match this and be the same size and same thrust as that, all right? So this part of this comes down here and takes on this configuration, but running horizontally, while this one's running vertically. And these come together and they form what is called a crystal key. All right? A crystal key has the bass tone key and this little thing here, which is what was taken away from the original overtone key, is the equalizer, is called the joule. That is the joule. It used to be, it was a quantum of the overtone. What's left after you take the joule away, and the joule is the same quantum as this part, when you take the joule away from the overtone, this is what is left of the quantum of energy stored in that key. This is called the Kasha key. All right? So this is a harmonic key set, where a full harmonic key set. When it goes through where they first meet, and then they merge and decide to power balance, right? And they become what is called crystal key. And a crystal key is a bass tone key plus its joule, which is an equal quantum of the overtone that is stored within the bass tone key. And it also has its corresponding Kasha key, which is the difference remaining from the original overtone quantum after you take away the joule. All right? Now, what happens here is before these guys met in the Ka level, right? They were here in level 9. When they do this little quantum resolution where they resolve their power differences, the Kasha keys stay in the Ka level, and the crystal keys pull in a bit into level 8, which is called the Ma level. And I have a feeling this has something to do with your Kama. But I'm not going there. Yeah, K-A-M-A? Yeah, there's just got to be an R in there somewhere, and I'm sure there is because we got Ra out there on the last layers. Right? But, yeah, I mean, if you want to know where your karma is, take a guess. It's probably stored right in the things behind your atoms. It's probably stored in the joules, actually, that are in your atoms. Because joules are actually, it's kind of funny. In the old days, I read that they used to think the joules was a joule was an invisible substance that was released from an atom when it was burned, completely. And now science has decided, no, they're not going to let it be that. They're going to just say it's a notation used for noticing an increment of heat that will raise a gram of water 1 degree Celsius or whatever, right? There is a substance that is released when things are burned and when atoms are burned, when they're taken down to their core. And they are these things. They are the jewels that are stored within the crystal keys. The crystal keys are made of magnogel, and I have a feeling in the planetary level that has to do with the lava beds, because it's magnogelizic. I can't read it from here; it's too small. Anyway, it gives the ether state, and I believe it's a warm liquid gel state. All right. So there are different kinds of keys. When we talk about blood plasma, when we get out to there's going to be a part of the starborn cycle that takes us out into beyond the starborn units and into what's called the seed atom cycles, where you get larger light ball constructions. We haven't even seen those graphs yet. They're after the starborn cycle, but before you get out here where we are, they have something to do with creating plasma keys or plasma carriers of these keys that are behind them. So when things are burned, what you are seeing is the release of part of the jewels that are stored in here. They're actually released in the atoms, in the molecules and atoms of atomic structure. So I wanted to show you that. Before we had the sparks came, the Kelowna sparks. The Kelowna sparks came together to form harmonic keys, and when the harmonic keys meet, they power balance each other and form. These are called, by the way, the Kasha keys are called the quantum differential keys, because they carry the difference between what the two quantums were, right? The difference between the overtone and the base tone, they carry the quantum differential. And these are called the quantum equilibrium keys, because they carry an equal amount of the joule count and the quantum of the overtone and base tone key. All right, so these become something else. Next one, please. And again, there's like 12 of these equals 12 of that and the whole bit. And I'll have all the 12 sometime tomorrow, because I was getting to the point where it would have taken me too long, because I got hung up, I think, on the 4th one. How many of those did it do what? And that's how many fire letters, and that's how many sparks, and that's what, right? Because you can go really wacky with the detail with this sometimes. But what the next stage is after you get, remember these guys up here, these little ones here, what you had were a crystal key, right? This would be like a set of 12 crystal keys. But notice there's little like starburst things happening in their centers right now. That means, in this diagram, I'm using this to illustrate, the Kasha keys have merged, the electrical keys have merged, come in from the Ka level and merged with the crystal keys. All right? So it's putting the quantums back together again, and that activates the full harmonic keys. When the harmonic keys activate, they group in sets of 12 around what's called a hydrogen bomb. Bomb? No, bond. I guess it could be a bomb. It probably is when you're trying to unmutate yourself. Okay, a hydrogen bond. Right. That's funny. Yeah, you got that just now, too. My brain is really slow today. I'm tired. Anyway, hydrogen bond. It's called hydrogen because it has to do with the hydrogelizic field in which these group. And I believe that's of the, who's out there? Ta, I believe. All right. So when out here we had the crystal keys, and here we had the Kasha keys, when they pull together, they pull into the 7th layer, which is the Ta layer, and that's the hydros layer. And there's certain interactions that take place that are very complex, but it causes the harmonic keys to activate, which means pull themselves together and pull into 7. And then once they do that, there are hydros standing wave points of gel points within the hydros Ta field, and they cause a group of 12 of the harmonic keys to assemble around one hydros unit and forming a hydrogen bond. And there's another thing that you get the JHA in there, where you get hydros and Ja something or other to get your hydrogen. And it is the same this is a dynamic that takes place through the hydrogen molecules, the hydrogen bonds within the DNA when you take it into the cellular and atomic level. So we went from Kelana sparks to chelons to harmonic keys to kasha keys and crystal key harmonic key sets to now activated crystal key sets that form one tachyon, because it's in the Ta field, right? That's the Ta-Jaleesic field, and it's a key ion, so it's tachyons, all right? And there are a number of set of tachyons that form, and then eventually, I believe, I forget how the numbers are driving me crazy, but you end up with, you need 1,728 harmonic keys, all right? And I believe it comes out to 12 tachyon cycles, and after that, you've built enough quantum in that taran. That's from the taran pulsing. However many pulses, I don't know. I have to do the math and back run it, and I'm hoping to get that. But if I don't have it by tomorrow, you get the idea anyway. You see where these are building. I think that's clear enough, at least with the pictures. What will happen next is called the beginning of the star-born cycle, where the taran has built enough quantum where it can go into tachyon activation, where there's major piezoelectric responses happening at the core, and they culminate in something called the flash point and 0 point, where everything pulls into the center, and the entire, first the particle, all pulls into the center through the flame back into source in a non-manifest state, and the particle pulls the entire taran in. The whole thing contracts and disappears out of manifestation. And what it does on the other side of that door, back into the non-manifest consciousness field of source, is it replicates. And with this first thing, it replicates times 2. So when the taran unit comes back, process of the tachyons activating and the hydrogen bonds in the centers activating, there's certain things that hydrogen turns to helium, which I believe is called hydrogen burning. Or helium burning. I think it's called hydrogen burning. But they ignite. It causes the tachyons that are stored in the 7th layer Ta to become what is called a tachyon superluminal field, and that creates other types of interactions that do culminate into all of them pulling into the center, pulling in the whole particle and the whole taran in for quantum replication. Next one, please. That's just showing really quick all the ones you just saw, and eventually we'll have it outlined, in larger letters. What did that do? How many keys? What was most important, right? So I'm in the process of getting the wording and things for those, but I wanted you to see that they exist. Next one, please. You might see why this takes so long sometimes with these diagrams. These are not easy, and they're all hand done. I'll draw them out, and then some of them I'll ask Az to do them on CAD. Thank goodness he knows how to do CAD. This one goes, if the word's wrong, we know better. It goes this way. Yeah. Yep. There we go. There are going to be lots of words on these. Here's where we go into abstract, where there's pictures and no words. This most of us have actually seen before, because it's the star-born cycle, the progression from what had been particle 1 to the triad, right, which is the particle 1 splitting and starting the phasing cycle, to the birth of the taran, and then the taran phasing to the birth of the dyad, where it does the 3, okay, the 3 goes in times 2. The 3 comes back, but it also comes back with 6 more particle. And there's something else that happens in the center that's driving me nuts trying to figure the quantums, because it has to do with, all right, here you have a times 1 particle. You have 3 particle and a times 1 particle, right? Then you have 6 particle and I think a times 2 particle. And there's something to do with the quantum content and the joule count of each one of those. And that's a whole other layer that's probably going to take me 6 months to try to decipher and unravel that. But just so you see how it works. So after the taran goes through all of those cycles to where it finally hits a full tachyon cycle, where it takes all its keys and can finally have enough quantum to pull them into the center for replication, disappears, pops back out as the replica, but with that at its center. All right. Then this whole set goes through its whole set of kelanas to chelons to harmonic keys to kasha keys and crystal keys to activated harmonic key tachyons to tachyon fields to where it can finally pop in. Now this it is called a dyad. All right. So we have the taran, first unit, the triad, which is considered the 0 axis. Now, at the number 1 axis is where the Taran is doing its thing and phasing. When it pops in and pops back out, Taran stays at that axis here because it returns after it pops back out. But it would be here in the center, and around it at this axis, 45-degree shift, you'd have the dyad, and it's bigger, right? That goes through its cycle, builds quantum, does the same thing, comes back. So you have 3 particuli times 2 equals 6 particuli. Then this one does the same thing after it finishes its tachyon cycle. 6 particuli times 2 equal 12 particuli. And I'm not sure if we go times 2 or times 4 on the particule. That's why I'm not even going to get into that until I have all that stuff analyzed to death, so I can know exactly what the times number is on the particule. But you can get the idea. It takes a tachyon cycle, a full tachyon cycle of key generation all the way up to tachyon generation to allow for one of these units, say this first one, to pop back out of creation, replicate itself, then come back out with its replica and form another creation. All right? Same thing happens here where the dyad and the Taran go back in. It's called the divine constant. The Taran is referred to as the divine constant because its 3 particuli and its flame will always come back out. All right? They always return back out, and it is the divine constant that all the rest are built on, so they consider that divine constant light seed. The dyad is I believe the star light unit. I think these all have names where you have like the starlight unit where you get up to like star fire units and that kind of stuff, and I don't have them memorized at this hour of the morning. Sometimes I do, but not right now. But this is just to show you things we have seen before about how they connect to the tachyon cycles. Each one of these would imply a tachyon cycle. We have dyad, we have myad, we have monad, okay? Then we have what's called the hub Amareya Adon cell, and that's only what we're on. We're on axis 1, axis 2, axis 3, axis 4, axis 5. You still have axis 6, axis 7, and axis 0, 8 to make a full rotation, and that would be a full starborn cycle, and something really neat happens. Now, through all of this, too, the other charts that you've seen it with this don't have these on. These are showing you the actual forms of the encryptions, the core encryptions held by each of these units, the particuli part of their encryption. So, as you see, this applies to the Taran. This is the held in the little Delezic units of Urs and Rus. You have the structure of the Taran, because each sphere implies the 12-point Gathara grid structure. This one, the dyad, is like that. And, of course, that one will be at its center because the Taran comes back too, but this is showing them just individually, and it's not showing the Gathara grids that pertain to the particule inside. It's just showing the particuli because it's the particuli that are replicating. Okay? This one, by the time you get to the myad, you've got this. Looks like snowflakes. These become important at some point. It has to do with understanding elemental commands and the encryptions that they carry, because these are actually families of consciousness as well that form the natural, probably elemental kingdoms. I wouldn't doubt it. I don't know for sure, but I'm wondering if elemental is really supposed to be elemental, because of the Allah unit that was the first spark of the Taran, right? So, and a lot of times you'll find words that are, just a little bit off in the encryption, but you can see where they had come from. So I don't know, but what they're showing you here is the building of each starborn unit, this whole cycle of this replication, this quantum building, quantum replication cycle. This is what how your light body starts. All right, how the light body came to being, the universal cosmic light body came to be this way, and it is how every light body, everything comes into manifestation originally from source, through this process. It means you have a light body that is structured like this as well. So it means you have a Taran, it means you have a dyad, it means you have a myad. It means you have a monad and a hub cell, and a couple others I'll show you in a minute. But here's what you also see is the building and changing encryptions. These are all little points. These are these Gathara centers in relation to these units are little points of Delezic radiation that hold specific quantums of electrical energy potential, stored electrical energy potential. Okay, so we're up to the hub, and that's on axis. That's axis 4 there. There's axis 5, which is pointing down. Next one, please. We got some words on that one. Can I have the next one, please? I did put the words in. I'm not even going to go. I explained enough about those for now. Yeah. Because I wanted to get to the next axis. I think this goes the other way. This is top, I think. No, that might be the other way. Yeah, the smaller ones. This is top. Yeah, this is top up here. Yeah. Yeah. What this is showing you, this is where it was getting really fun playing with the photocopier and Mylars, overlaying Mylars and things. I didn't have the heart to try to ask Az to do the encryption part on that one. He's already done the 1728, because when you get to, no, this is the 144, sorry. When you get to the number of Partakai units, in the last one you saw, which was the hub cell, there were 48 Partakai units in the replication at that point. You had the 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 24 times 2 is 48. And then enough quantum has been built for a leap to occur. And that leap goes 48 times 3, which is 144. So when we get to the next axis, the unit that, when the hub cell pops in, disappears, and comes back out with itself and everything that was in it before, but with its new replica, it also comes out with this, which is a 144 cell unit. That is called the divine blueprint. It is actually called the Adon. That's why they've said, like, the Amareya hub cell, Adon hub cell. This is the Adon part of the hub cell. It's the Adonic blueprint, or the divine blueprint 144. Right? The next one, that does its phasing and building more quantum. This is its encryption, by the way, and it's really, really pretty. It's not exactly perfectly aligned, but they're close enough. There's just a few of the little lines you wouldn't be able to see. But these are all those cathara-grids, right? Each one of these spheres is a monadic configuration. So that monad encryption cluster forms these. These are the bases that start the formations of crystallization of things that form molecules. These govern the elemental formations here on the manifest level, and the 3D manifest level, as well as the multidimensional manifest level. But they start here with the encryption. And remember, this all started with the phasing of the Tarn. It started with Partakai 1 and 2. Right? So we're already up to 144 Partakai units. I have no idea what the Partakey at the center, at this point, what charge it carries. A times what charge? I don't know, because it may do something a little bit different. I'm not sure if it's just doing the times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, or if there's another twist because it's interacting with the others. So I won't put anything on that until I find that out for sure. Next one, please. When that pops in and goes back to its next level of expansion, it goes times 12. This time. So it went times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, 48 times 3, 144, disappears, goes times 12, because there were so many there, they replicated so many more. It creates a times 12, 144 times 12 is 1,728 Partakai units. Now, each of these Partakai units represent a key set. So when we talk about the 1,728 keys of the Garden of Eden, this is the Edon unit. It's on axis 7. And you'll see in a little bit where it fits in relation to the expansion levels, because when you see a cathara grid, if you can see where this fits in relation to the expansion spiral, you'll also see that you have one in your own light body structure. And you have one of each of these in your own light body structure. They're the core of which your light body structure has grown out of. So we have 1,728 Partakai to the Edon. And that encryption up there, right? That was one set of 144. You got 12 of those. I didn't even attempt to cut up little pieces of mylar and stick them on top of each other in order to get that many of those in there. I couldn't do it. It's something Az might be able to do on CAD if he ever wants to. But I wouldn't insist on it. You get the idea, right? All right. Next one, please. Now, something interesting happens. I think that it needs to go the other way. I think, yeah, no, possibly this way. Where is top? I think that's that side. Where are we? Try to see. Yeah, that's bigger, but try flipping it this way. Should this be on that side, maybe? Yeah. That still comes after that. Okay. Anyway, let's look at this one for a minute. There is a way this goes. Is there a page number? If there's a page number on it, I'll tell you. Okay, it is page 15. Okay, there we go. Now, on this one, which would be axis 0, 8, This is backwards. This is not 0, 8. This is the top. This needs to be on top, right there, on the other side. Yeah. There we go. Ah! No, there. Right? That's when it has made a full rotation, went from 7 where the E down was, back to 8, which was the 0 point, starting point. And it's expanded this big, which on the Cathara grid would look like this, right? It's up to the 11.5 point and the 1.5 point here. All right? This is where you have the 1728 of the Edon times 12, which gives you 20,736 Partakai units. Right? And the most I could do to try to illustrate that was show, remember those pretty little things that looked like fuzzy snowflakes that went with 144, I believe it was? You have a bunch of those and a bunch of those and a bunch of those there in the 12 configuration, and that's what you get there. We're getting T-shirts done with these, because as did this one. I think it's this one we're doing, isn't it? Or no, we're doing the Eden one first, the 1728, yeah, because they might not be able to hold the pattern on this. But they're really pretty. It has like Return to the Garden shirts coming. And it has the Edon 1728 in full color and that kind of stuff, because as did it on CAD, and it came out really pretty. So anyway, when you see it, this is what it's referring to. Now, this has gone through what's called actually a 6 cycle, even though there's 8 notches to it. The first 6 are full key generation cycles. Then the 7th cycle, from 6 to 7, is what's called Hitharon-Hitharo cycle, which are acceleration cycles. And then from 7 to 8 is actually what's called a Rushite reset cycle. And there's other characteristics that are actually taking place as well as key generation, but I think they're connected to where the tachyon things happen. All right, so just so you know that this is your classic 6 cycle. Once that occurs, there's something neat that happens, and there's something that happens in between that I don't have shown on this diagram yet. But the 0-8 expansion level is there, and then there's something that happens that has to do with the flame, and I'll show you in a little bit. And what you come up with is the birth of the seed atom, and this is called the unici seed atom. We're going to have the unici, the point of all union. It is the first seed atom from the core levels coming out. All right, we're still in like the inner domains, or the core domains of manifestation, when we're talking about these parts of cosmic anatomy or personal anatomy. We here on this level are in the outer domain, so you still have inner, middle, and to get to domains to go through of light body building, of light cell building and replication before you get to where we actually are here. But the fact that we are here implies we have this whole structure going back down right to core, and it is our direct and immediate connection to source. What this has to do about sex is when your light body is working properly, you should be able to phase all of your light cells together, and your keys sing to each other and generate your tachyons faster, and you should be able to merge into one being ball of conscious light and go back to source together and then come back out again and experience a level of absolute love that is always a trinity. You, a partner, and source. And sometimes it's just you and source. You don't need a partner for that kind of love, for that kind of recreation, procreation, because you are recreating yourself, re-energizing yourself, or as a couple you're doing that. There is also a magic that can be generated with the coupling of fields that are capable of running the star-born cycle, and even ones that are mutated like what has taken place on this planet. There's a force, and I'm not sure what it is yet, but I think by the end of tomorrow we may have a bit better idea of why certain forces of the negative sort in this universe have tried so hard to harness the elemental and sexual energies of the races on this planet. Because there's something that not only for feeding, there's something even more, and I don't know what it is, but I can sense it. And Az has mentioned this too. He said, "Yeah, but it's bigger than just wanting to feed on the energy." Yeah, they've certain forces in the astral and stuff have been doing that and have been exploiting sexuality here and pushing humans into being doing really dumb things with their bodies in order to allow field attachments to come in with your fields and suck energy off you or worse. But there is something I think that can happen to a planet through these energies. If you have enough bodies doing enough of certain things with these sacred sexual energies, with these sacred energies, it can create certain things. And I have a feeling we're going to know a little bit more about what that is by the end of tomorrow, because I have a feeling we may be going to be doing it in a good way. I don't know. But it has something to do with helping to get the eartha gates open, where we, open the passage for anything that can, walk, drag, or crawl it in, kind of thing, like they do with used car sales, where just get it here and, we'll give you a trade-in or whatever. If we can get through the gates, even if we're crawling, right, at least we won't be caught in a spiral of probably rather rapid downward evolution that the threshold activations, the Medtronic activations in these planetary grids are causing in our contemporary times. This is not something 2,000 years away that we're preparing for. It's something that could be as soon as 3 days from now, or possibly as far as 2047 last time I heard, but I'm not sure if that still holds. So anyway, this is the Unisci. It comes after the return to the 0-8 axis after the first rotation. This is just the first expansion level, right? From the first particle through the Taran out to the quantum building. And it's not just building quantum and energy, it's also expanding the size of the form, the light form that is created. This one, the Unisci, has 30 or 2 sets of 15 light balls. What this is actually is some of us have seen before was called the Yanesa seed atom, which is a 15-cell seed atom, right? Well, before the Yanesa, there is the Unisci, and that's the first one. And later, as the outpicturing starts to occur, where quantums are being broken down, they're being polarized, where you will get one of these creating two. Kind of like a male and a female Yanesa set of outer seed atom cells. But this is the core seed atom cell. It is the first seed atom cell of source, and it is called the Unisci. We're going to be doing things, I think, at the Phoenix workshop that have to do with journeys called Return to the Unisci, which are going to involve projections. And with any luck, if our wonderful artist lady person who's so good with doing the beautiful paintings and things, or with the computer graphics, this is the core template. These are all colored spheres, and there's a flame journey that you project through certain parts. Yeah, it activates this in your body, and it has something to do with your base chakra as well. And I don't know what that is yet, but by tomorrow I may, if I'm still coherent. I'm a bit tired, so I'm running in slow motion now. You might know why. But anyway, there's that of the 20,736 particle. When it goes in, disappears, and replicates, it comes back out as a 30-cell seed atom, and I believe that is the transition from the core worlds to the inner worlds, all right? Like, say, the core domains. And they do all their phasing, and then they finally, their starborn cycle creates the seed atom, or the first cell of the inner domains, right? Then there'd be a cycle of expansion that would create the whole expansion set in the same, like a full 6 cycle, as they call it, with the 8 axes in the inner domains. Then there would be one that did the same, and that would culminate in a middle seed atom, and then that would do its cycle of starborn, and it would finally get us to the outer domain seed atom creation, and that would do its cycle of creation of the light body. On the end of that whole chain, you would end up with the creation of the Eucatharista body, which is the outer domains body that we first started when we started studying the Stairway to Heaven and all of that. And I'm not going to brutalize all of us by going through the stages of the Hala bodies and things right now. We've done that several times. I can touch on them tomorrow because I have them here, but there's some other things I want to get to that are more important. Then I will show where there is a sequence of things that there's 2 cycles. I have to learn what the next cycle is. The starborn cycle is called the budding cycle. All right, and that's where replication and expansion through self-procreation, basically. It didn't need a partner. In other words, it just had, the parts of itself, and it expanded and replicated itself. And these are consciousness fields, not just thingies, not just little radiation balls floating around. These are fields of consciousness. You have the Allah collectives. You have the Krista collectives. There's the Kristalla is the Kristalla core. It's the Christ Allah collectives, and these are fields of consciousness, eternal life consciousness that are there. They've been there from first creation, and they always will be there, because first creation is eternal and perpetual. So when we look at the religions and the sacred words that religions come up with, they're drawing those from the original teachings. These teachings belong to everyone once, and not just on this planet. They belong to everyone, everywhere, and they were known. And in certain places they were written down, and in other places they were taken and used and misused. And all of the books that have been on this planet originally drew portions of their material from the original Mahabharata texts, which were the beginning translations of these. These are the hub texts. These are the ones that get into stuff that weren't even in the outer domain Mahabharata teachings. They're from the hub races, because we need to be able to become hubbable. I think I'm getting tired. Hubbable. We need to be able to get hubbable if we're going to go through gates in order to go with Eartha, who is going through a starborn cycle. There is a starborn cycle. The starfire part of the starborn cycle is when, after you have a full creation, you're all the way out to the outer domains, there are certain regular points in time, sometimes billions of years, sometimes nanoseconds, depending on what light body is phasing, where everything will pull back in. One section at a time will pull back in until they all go back into source, and then kind of go pop, 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 and then recreate outward again. Right? We are moving toward now. We are in a starfire cycle, and we are preparing to be able to what's called ride the light fantastic, which is ride a tachyon wave, which means we have to be able to generate tachyons and hold tachyon field in our body, and able to be I can't talk anymore, I'm too tired, and able to take ourselves through with Eartha into an inhale into source, and then back out again in natural recreation. What this process will do is create healing, and the things, the Metatronic things, will actually be cut free in their own space. They will fall where they stand. They will have their reality field. It's not going to go away, but it's going to be cut off from the natural ones. It can't do starfire. It can't go back into source, because it would disintegrate if it attempted to, because the coding and the encryption in things that have now Metatronic matter, like a lot of the Earth grids, they can't go back in anymore. They don't have the ascension or inscension potential anymore, because their encryption has been so distorted that it can't pass through the natural encryptions of the natural flame body levels of the natural light body structure. We are preparing to be able to go through with the part of this planet called Eartha that still does have and has retained that ability. So it's what we're doing is quite timely. It's not just for fun or just because we want to have, like, a little sticker on our forehead that says, I am a master's in metaphysics, that kind of stuff. It's not about that. I mean, you will learn a lot of things in metaphysics that many masters of metaphysics, or those who call themselves such down here, have no idea. But anyway, one cycle from Taran all the way up to the 20,736. What do they call that? They called that, I think eventually that's going to be called the Jadon, but in this level they called it the Rashala. And this is where you start getting into the Rashalay body and that kind of thing, but on the outer levels. Creates the Unisai. Next one, please. This is the encryption. Oh, never mind. We're just looking at the encryptions now. Anyway, there's going to be a point where they give us information on the encryptions. This would have been just the first one, right, that went with the triad before we even got to the Taran. Each of these encryptions have something to do with a body of elemental force and a collective of consciousness that is an elemental field. And they create all sorts of different things, like an elemental field, say the parent consciousness of that field that holds a certain encryption, will create all sorts of different things, from different subatomic units to different atoms and molecules, to different compound substances, to different life forms, like fairies and trolls and things like that, or chemicals. All of these things are created from the spark units that are just like the original. Just like we say we are units of the consciousness, or units of the consciousness of God's source, or sparks of the face, sparks of the face of God's source. Every time that one of these parts of the eternal anatomy cycles and phases and sends backflow currents back into source, another set of outflow currents are released, and these outflow currents create literally conscious identity fields that are flowing back and forth, individuals that are part of a sea of consciousness, let's say. They'll have different families. You could look at each one of these encryptions as a specific group of elements, all right, with, say, one element family, and say that created 12, because there's supposed to be 144 naturally occurring elements on the periodic table. And I don't know if we're going to find out exactly what they are, but I know celestaline should be one of them, and that's the stuff that's supposed to activate chemically in the DNA that allows your DNA to fold up so you can turn into light and go through gates. And hopefully that's going to be one of the first that come back. But when we see these diagrams, there's going to be words eventually. I'm not even going to try to put the words to these because there's a whole block of transmission I'm getting that probably might have to do with Phoenix. I'm not sure. But I wanted you to see they were there. These were what you saw in little form when we saw the starburn cycle going by. These were the little encryptions, and these are showing them bigger in order to be able to see actually what the Cathara centers are doing. I don't know why they want me to do these, but it has to do with knowing how to use certain encryption or the language of encryption in order to communicate directly in some way with the elemental forces that correspond with that. Somewhere in here, I think we have the first 5 of the elemental consciousness that are formed from the Tauran itself, and it's something like they are not the earth, air, water, fire, ether. They are the things before those commands. All right, they are the larger elemental commands. And I'm still trying to get all the transmission down on it because it keeps flipping. And one part of it, sometimes when it takes transmission, a part of it's like been chewed up in a shredder, and you try to pull it apart. So what is that saying? And you can't get it, so you just have to wait until later until it sorts itself. So I'm waiting on some of that. But this will take us back to understanding what are these energies we're running with sex drive when we orgasm. What does that have to do with these frequencies? Because it has to do with lots of things that have to do with these frequencies. I could take you on a very long journey. It would probably take another 4 hours just to get you through to the point where I could get to the point, and I'm not going to do that, though the new people would probably appreciate it because you might not have seen light body fly by before as far as the structures of, that are we're still trying to finish those 30 pages to put in as the complementary extra pages in K23, but we're still waiting for some of this information because it goes with it. What I think I'm going to do is I'm just wondering, anybody want a real quick break? Okay. Yeah, I just got that urge. I don't know. All right. Why don't we do like a 5 or 10, but come back. I will try to let you go. You're probably exhausted too, and I understand, but I do want to get to a couple of points before tomorrow, but I won't take you all the way through the whole light body thing again because you know it's there. Ding, ding, round 2. Right? Sometimes it feels like quite a journey. Now, I have a whole series of the ones that have the encryption patterns that you saw in little form next to the particular units that the encryption went with. Those don't have words on them right now, so it's just kind of like looking at lots of Cathara grids interwoven with each other and going, that's interesting. Right? What? Until we have the what, which we may have at least some more about what I can talk about those encryptions. I'll have some of that probably more tomorrow when we start to understand the elemental command connection a bit better, because I think each one of those encryptions for each one of those layers of the starborn cycle, each one of those units, each of the encryptions corresponds to a specific family of consciousness that does govern and control, because they created and perpetually create the particular elemental and atomic fields or atomic fields that go with that encryption. So we'll see if they give us that tomorrow or if they're just giving us a little tidbit as far as where it's going. They did say that the information that needs to be covered in covering this subject matter, they said they wanted to break it up over the 3 workshops because there's a huge amount of data. And right now we're working on the one of understanding our energetic relationship to the light body structure that a lot of us already know we have, but learning how that anchors into the sexual reality. So I'm going to jump over the encryption graphs that are just larger versions of the little encryptions that we already looked at until we have more data on them. But what I want to jump to is just a little bit closer look at the starborn cycle that we just looked at. And the starborn cycle, if you remember, was from when the first Partakai phases and creates the triad, and the triad phases and creates the Taran. And then the Taran, with its photogenerator Partakey unit at the center, begins the process of tachyon cycling, where it does key generation cycles, Kilon cycles, and then harmonic key cycles, and then harmonic key cycles become tachyon cycles, and they become quantum replication cycles, which are the birthing cycles of the times 2 times 2 times 2, and then times 3 times 12 times 12, which gives you the core expansion from whence there was nothing, just a thought in the mind or consciousness field of God's source. And from there, all creation emerged. And from that point, all creation perpetually reemerges. It cycles out and cycles back. It inhales into God's source and then exhales back out. And what exhales back out is this whole progression of light body cells that starts with the triad, the Partakai, the triad, and the Taran, and builds up through the whole set of the starborn cycle. And again, that's just the core cycle of expansion that creates the core domain light body fields. We have those, but we also have an inner layer, a middle layer, and the outer layer that is our most immediate layer of our light body cells. Now, this is just looking at in the proportions of Cathara grid. This particular Cathara grid is interesting because what it actually is showing you is a progression, a mathematical progression of size and quantum, where if we start with this little tiny Cathara grid in the center, the way they told me how to do this, because I do not enjoy math, particularly the way it's done here. I'm just not inclined that way. I'm not good at it. So they try to talk to me in pictures and explain math in terms of ratio relationships, right? You know, like, well, you need 50% of that. That means make that